Finally time for bed. I'm exhausted. I'm so excited to just go to sleep.
Hey,
Oh God, no, not again. Please just let me go to sleep.
hey, don't blame me. I'm just here for a good time.
Why won't you let me go to sleep tonight?
Maybe you drink too much coffee.
No, that's not true. I had my normal amount of coffee. What's the real reason?
Stress? Anxiety?
No more so than usual.
We should see someone about that.
Brain,
Ugh, fine.
what are you going on about tonight?
You remember that time in 4th grade when you dropped that lunch tray?
Oh, we do this like every night. No one remembers that but us. Just drop it.
Like the lunch tray?
Brain,
Fine. What if we think about writing?
really?
If you'll stop
You
complaining.
could think about writing, I guess.
Okay, so you know letters? yeah, you know letters. But do you know how letters go together? Remember that podcast we listened to 3 years ago and that lady mentioned 2 letters she uses in her draft? And you remember how Tad Williams writes so good? And how we spent 100 hours reading his books and...
Okay. Weird connection, but I think I see where you're going. I'll think about it more.
That's what I'm doing. If you take letters in the English language and you put them together and you graph out all the pairings of letters and you compare the most and least
Brain,
common...
I got it. You did a good job. This could be somewhat of an interesting idea.
I did good.
You did good.
We have to pee.
So yeah, that's how my brain works. Late the other night, I was laying in bed, and I started thinking about 2 things. Savannah Gilbo's fantastic writing podcast, Fiction Writing Made Easy, and Tad Williams' Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. 2 things that at first seemed to not be connected at all, but then I had an epiphany. In her episode, titled 3 Tips for Writing a Draft in 90 Days, Savannah talks about an editing trick that she does using the letters TK. And it's a super useful drafting tip. When writing the first draft of her stories, she uses these 2 letters to mark writing to be done in later edits. In use, it might be something like this.
She walked into the towering cathedral, her steps echoing around her like laughter from an unseen stony monster. The cathedral details TK. I've been waiting for you,
A voice said in the shadow of the altar. Yeah. This allows the author to move on to writing the more important aspects of a first draft and passing off the detail writing to the next edit. And getting through the first draft is the hardest part, so making that process easier is always a smart move. So why choose the letters TK? Well, let's let Savannah tell you herself.
The letters TK stand for to come, like details to come, but we use K instead of C because T and K don't appear in any word in the English language together.
TK doesn't come up very often in the English language, unless you're a hut keeper eating latkes with a pocket knife in the out kitchen. But that probably doesn't happen very often. I don't know. So what does this have to do with world building? Savannah Gilbo got my brain started on this idea of letter pairings. TK may not come up very often in English, but what about other languages? And from there, I remembered some really fantastic writing choices that Tad Williams made in his books, specifically in how he used similar letter pairings and character names to bring cultures to life. The world of Austin Ard, from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, is full of different peoples. Letter pairings play a big part in creating and identifying those cultures and helping them feel real while also helping the reader understand what characters are part of what people groups. So let's look at some quick examples and no spoilers. The Rimmersmen are reminiscent of a cold weather people like the Norsemen or Vikings, and their names within the stories have very specific letter pairings. Ingenjegger, Gutrin, Jarnaga, Sluttig. All of these characters are from the same people group, and they share a very specific focus on that hard G sound. We also have Isgrimnir and Isorn, maybe? And guess what? They're father and son. And that focus on the IS letters helps us connect those characters together. Now you might be saying, Carson, a lot of these characters just have a G in their name. All kinds of people and cultures have G's in their name. Some real G's move in silence like lasagna. But within the confines of this book, with dozens of different characters, only 3 other characters use a G in their name. In the real world, this sort of attention wouldn't really be a clear-cut indicator of what character comes from what culture. But within the limited world of the book, Tad Williams uses this as a shortcut to establishing this group of people as separate to the other cultures. If you have this hard G sound in your name, you are likely a Rimmersman. And he continues with it. Benebik is a favorite character of mine in all of fantasy. He's a Canuck, a Canuck, troll. Canuck being his people and troll being his race? Species? I don't really know where to put that. His real name is this, but he goes by Benebik for the ease of people who don't speak his language. Another great writing trick to use in your stories. Benebik, in both his short name and his full name, has these very specific letter pairings that are unique to the Canuck. We can look at other Canuck names to better identify those similarities. Benebik, Ukakuk, Chuku, Siski, Kantika. Here the focus isn't on that G sound like before, but full of these hard K sounds. The spellings bounce between Ks and Qs, but with similar pronunciations. And this distinctive style of name easily separates the Canuck trolls from the other names and cultures throughout the story. And the most pronounced of these examples are the Scythi, the elf-like race of Austin Ard. Scythi is a name that the humans give them, but they go by the Kaidaya. And then 2 tribes split from each other, they take new names. We have the Zadaya and the Hikadaya, and you can kind of see where this is going. We get names like Inaluki, Jiriki, Aditu, Amarasu, Ayaminu, and Utuku. A heavy leaning on ending in the I and the U vowels, typically preceded by a K sound. Again, very distinctive, especially when comparing it to our main perspective characters, Simon and Miriamel. Using these sort of letter pairings in the Scythi make them feel very far removed from the humans in the story, which, if you do read the books, is clearly the intention. The Priory of the Orange Tree does this as well. There is a people group where all of the names have this preceding Uk. Idaz Uk Nara, Chasar Uk Ispad, Jandu Uk Nara. Directly inspired by the Middle Eastern Al, like Kazim al-Shahir or Alam al-Shamsi. Pardon my pronunciation, I'm trying. In Middle Eastern names, this al connector translates to the, sort of signifying where someone came from. A family name that could also be tied to a location, but clearly I'm no expert in Middle Eastern languages, this is all just surface level research. So, how do you use this? In one of my working novels, a retelling of the discovery of the New World through a lens of fantasy, I have a village of native peoples. And this village worships a deity named Keep. Because of their close connection to their deity, all of the people within that village name themselves starting with the letters K-E. And to me, this was a really interesting way to show cultural and religious connection, a really important aspect in true life. We see it in all different cultures around the world and all throughout history. But now I had an issue. I had created a letter pairing that needed some author attention. Author attention is when we fudge the reality of our novel in a way that lets us create a better story. So how do we make this resulting letter pairing, 1, unique, and 2, not confusing to the reader, because that's the most important thing. Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game, has a great bit of advice on naming characters. He does his best to avoid creating multiple characters with names starting with the same letter, especially if they plan on interacting. And I typically follow this same rule, however, I just dug my own grave by establishing this letter pairing for this village. All of these characters are going to start with the same letters. So what I did was to have most characters within this village referred to by their position or title, like when you have a family name and a formal name. Now, instead of Kikich and Kika and Kaleo, we have characters largely referred to as the War Mother and the Elder and the Visioner. Very unique names that allow me to differentiate these characters for the reader. But they also allow me to use those letter pairings and establish depth to this culture. More conscious decisions about how this culture operates. Another thing that I did in this instance was to avoid creating other characters in this novel that had a name beginning with the letter K. This sort of author attention let me have this village and a religion that would be a really important part of the story truly feel unique in the world. I love world building, and I think just about any author does. When we write our stories, we're crafting everything to fit the characters, the setting, and the plot of our novel. You truly are sculpting a formless mass of ideas into one with structure and purpose, and it's the greatest thing about writing. I find this idea really interesting. It's one of the many ways I'm going to expand the world building of my own novels, and I encourage you to do so too. Now, I'm personally not going to go the Tolkien route and create full languages for my cultures, but doing a trick like this hints at that kind of depth behind the scenes. And I personally do my best to avoid the pitfalls of early classic European-driven fantasy, and I try to include a more diverse set of people in my stories. And I think doing this makes your story feel less like a fairy tale and more like a true world. Now, these sort of thoughts go through my head nearly every night, and if you like deconstructing stories and applying theory to the writing that we know and love, then like and subscribe. You can find even more information on this topic on my website at www.writingtheory.com. Thanks for watching.